we had scheduled a retreat that was to be held on the land for this weekend, but it'll be held at some future time when it's more beneficial for more people to attend. It was to be an opportunity to come together and explore Zazen, the Dharma, with a focus on birds. Why birds? To many of us, birds might be in the nice to have category if we think about them at all. But think of this. Birds have been on this planet longer than hominids, us, and we have co-evolved with birds. All Dharma taught by the Buddha and ancestors co-originated with birds. Birds fly through and perch on the sutras. We'll see this today with a writing by Dogen Zenji and a fascicle of the Shoho Genzo entitled The Point of Zazen. When we learn to see and hear birds, they teach us Zen, life as it is. As a society, our relationship with birds could be better. Setting aside the cataclysmic decline in the populations, we don't kill them like we used to by the millions to put on hats. So that's an improvement, thanks in part to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. But more children, or children can name more characters of Pokemon than species of birds. And yet evidence-based studies show a positive relationship between birdsong and human well-being. Whether we recognize it or not, we are in relationship with birds. Birds are always watching us with their relatively excellent vision. And from a higher vantage point, they can see what we can't. When people lived most of their lives outdoors, a sudden silence of birds would have been noticed. Something is coming. Like the sudden silence of crickets at night or the hush of a group of people, it puts you on edge a little bit. It builds anticipation. With long stretches of our lives now hearing no bird song and no crickets at all, I think our primitive ancestral selves must be hovering around anxiety. I have a theory that just as people play a radio or have the TV going on in the background to feel as if there's a comforting group of people around them, people play music all day on Spotify or whatever to get that well-being of bird song around them. I spent a lot of time listening to birds in advance of this talk. I even watched them some, but I'm really not very good at seeing birds. I could use some improvement. If I don't dedicate myself to just stopping and watching, my experience of birds is almost always a flash of wings departing. It's hard to have a great feeling about something that is always fleeing from you. So I can see why people may not care if they don't make an effort to stop and be present. I mentioned that birds are always watching us. So to avoid having them constantly departing from you in advance, you have to stop what you're doing altogether and just be with them. I used to have a project at the Gulf Coast Bird Observatory down in Lake Jackson. And one day I thought, I never look around here. I just am always working. I'm leading the volunteers and propagating plants. And I should look around. So I wanted to walk some trails and I took off down the road. And after a while, I noticed the sounds of some crows yelling up in the tall trees. And there was some crashing around, the sounds of branches being knocked around. But I just kept going. I never slacked my pace to actually see what was going on properly. Seeing me first, a bald eagle took flight. And it dropped the furry animal that had it in its talons. And this host of crows went storming after it. And I glimpsed this only for a moment. And I could have missed that moment too. Taking time to stop and see what was happening without just barging into the event could have really been different for all of us. I have much to learn about being with birds. Those are the skills that Stuart Nelson will share with us when the retreat takes place in the future. For now, I have these observations from other birders to share. Some quotes. From Alison Zach, a nature writer. Birds, she says, bird like a complete novice with a beginner's mind, as the Buddhist would say, simply experience the individual in front of you, separate from all previously held knowledge and everything else you long to learn. Why does naming so often mean knowing anyway? Is being able to correctly identify 800 species really better than having intimately known a handful? I think not. Instead of just checking off boxes, yearn to forge a deeper connection with a fellow being. Be a perpetually amateur birder. You can still keep lists. I have mine, however poorly maintained, to this day. Listing can act as a bridge to coexisting. Use them as reminders that you still get to share your world with new beings. And then this from a writer who is sitting outdoors, sitting Zazen outdoors in Brooklyn, and he was allowing his bird identification app, Merlin, to play while he sat to record it. He says, all told, nearly 20 species are picked up by Merlin by the time my sit is ending. If you'd asked me beforehand, I would have said there were maybe 3-4 kinds of birds holding court in this Crown Heights patch of weeds. I'm quietly astounded and enlarged. In yesterday's Dharma talk, the teacher spoke of waking at dawn and, on hearing the birds outside his window, resisting the urge to identify and categorize, hoping to experience their presence without thought, without the me that does the identifying. That's important, the crux of the biscuit even, he says, but so is acknowledging the vastness of the kinds of existences in which we are constantly immersed and of which we are very much part and parcel. Merlin hears me too, hears it all. It just names the birds. That was from Ty Burr, writing in a Zen diary. Zen diner. Diary, bird list grows in Brooklyn. And then this from Benjamin Pumphrey, which was published in The Lion's Roar. How many of us would continue birding if at every outing we merely saw the same robins, cardinals, and chickadees that we saw the last time? How many of us would make a lifelong hobby of that? We're all too easily misled into thinking that value is to be found in the novel at the expense of the ordinary, the rare birds at the expense of the sparrows. But Zen practice helps us discover the profound and subtle radiance of the world. As we continue with Zen, we learn to see again. We learn to be in the world again more fully. Just another vulture becomes vulture. Crow becomes crow. We also see each other freshly for the first time each time. So this is what I've learned on the job. Sit still without any expectation of catching a bird, and they may reveal themselves. You keep your seat by the window, or the patio, or the log in the forest, moving only gently with keen awareness, if at all. You notice your breath and make it gentle, because sighing or puffing scares away the birds that were just beginning to return, and the whistling of the air through your right nostril, say, covers the song of a bird in the distance. You are simultaneously aware of your own condition and the world around you. You forget what you're doing sometimes, and then you come back to it with the help of your 6 senses. It is very much like Zazen. Birding is moving from the human-centric world to the world that is not centered around humans. The non-human centric world is there for us to discover as participants, not tyrants. We humans have a place in the non-human centric world. We humans have a place in the non-human centric world, and we always have. The act of moving worlds is physical as well as mental. Along the way, values shift. Unexpected things become precious. It is very much like Zazen. Now we'll turn to the writings of Dogen with the story. Yaoshan, great master Hongdao, was sitting. A monk asked him, "In steadfast sitting, what do you think?" Yaoshan said, "Think, not thinking." "How do you think, not thinking?" Yaoshan replied, "Beyond thinking." Dogen Zenji offers this conversation in his chapter or fascicle, The Point of Zazen, or in another translation, The Acupuncture Needle of Zazen, which is part of the Shobogenzo, the treasury of the true Dharma eye. Those of you who listen to the Sunday Dharma talks regularly will recognize that this is the source on which we're basing all the Dharma talks this year. It's a fundamental text for Zen and Zen practice, written by the founder of our lineage, Dogen Zenji, in the 13th century in Japan. So it's very important, and it can be difficult to understand because he's using words to help us understand what you can't say in words. What is beyond words, I should say. A main thing about Buddhism is don't make assumptions. And yet I have two assumptions for today's talk about Dogen Zenji. One is that he's writing in order to help people, including ourselves. And two is that he's describing ordinary existence as it is. So Dogen gives us the story of an ancient conversation to help us understand the point of Zazen. How do you think, not thinking? Yaoshan replied, beyond thinking. You may ask, what is beyond thinking? Birdsong. Recall Tai Ber saying in the quote that his teacher hears the birds outside his window, resisting the urge to identify and categorize, hoping to experience their presence without thought, without the me that does the identifying. In other words, beyond thinking. It may last a moment before the grind of categorizing, judging, and limiting kicks back in, but it's a moment of absolute freedom. There's much more in this fascicle, each of these things could be its own Dharma talk. There's a famous story of Nandwei polishing a tile, a roof tile, or painting tile, as if to make a mirror, when Mazu says he's sitting to become a Buddha. There's an investigation of Zen master Nandwei's phrase, killing Buddha. There's a decrying of monks in China who believe that Zazen is only for beginners. Dogen greatly esteems the poem, The Point of Zazen by Zhang Jue, and says, and now to his writing, he says, the point of Zazen, written by Zhang Jue of the Tiantong Zhengdai Monastery in China, alone is a work of a Buddha ancestor. It is a true point of Zazen with penetrating words. It is the only light that illuminates the inside and outside of the world of phenomena. It is Buddha ancestor among Buddha ancestors at past and present. Earlier Buddhas and later Buddhas have been led to Zazen by this teaching. Present Buddhas and past Buddhas are actualized by this point of Zazen. It is as follows. The hub of activity, the hub of Buddha's activity, the turning of the ancestors' hub, is known free from forms, illuminated beyond conditions. As it is known free of forms, the knowledge is subtle. As it is illuminated beyond conditions, the illumination is wondrous. When the knowledge is subtle, There is no thought of discrimination. When the illumination is wondrous, there is not the slightest hint. Where there is no thought of discrimination, the knowledge is extraordinary with no comparison. Where there is not the slightest hint, the illumination has nothing to grasp. The water is clear to the bottom where the fish swims without moving. The sky is vast and boundless where the bird flies away and disappears. The hub of Buddha's activity in the first lines is Zazen. It's not hard to grasp this conceptually. Shakyamuni Buddha realized enlightenment while sitting Zazen and continued sitting practice throughout the rest of his long life. But in the stanzas that follow, we're guided further from what we can hang our conceptualizing on. He says, there's not the slightest hint. There's nothing to grasp. The poem concludes with the tangible concepts again. The image of the fish in the clear water and a bird flying in the vast sky. He is, after all, talking about ordinary life. If you've ever chanted the Genjo Koan during our morning service, Dogen's use of the fish and bird analogy will be familiar. He says, a fish swims in the ocean, and no matter how far it swims, there's no end to the water. A bird flies in the sky, and no matter how far it flies, there's no end to the air. However, the fish and the bird have never left their elements. In Zazen, we're like the fish, barely moving in the supporting flow of the clearest water. We're like the bird that migrates thousands of miles and is always at home. Using the same sort of braided format for the poem, Dogen wrote his version. He says, this is my text, the point of Zazen. The hub of Buddha's activity, the turning of the ancestor's hub, moves along with beyond thinking and is completed in the realm of beyond merging. As it moves along with beyond thinking, its appearing is immediate, and it is completed in the realm of beyond merging. Completeness itself is realization. When its appearing is intimate, you have no illusion. When completeness reveals itself, it is neither real nor apparent. When you have immediacy without illusion, immediacy is dropping away with no obstacles. Realization, beyond real or apparent, is effort without expectation. Clear water all the way to the bottom. A fish swims like a fish. Vast sky, transparent throughout. A bird flies like a bird. He says, although Zhang Zhui's text is not incomplete, Zazen may be spoken of in this way. All descendants of Buddha ancestors should practice Zazen as the single great matter. It is the authentic seal transmitted from person to person. My role here is not to hand you a version of my answers, but to offer you the opportunity to see and realize these teachings, just as my teacher, Galen Roshi, has offered me the opportunity. Zen is shared person to person, like exchanging heads and faces, as Dogen says in another portion of the fascicle. I am deeply grateful for the opportunity. So now let us take a break, and at every chance, watch for birds to reveal themselves and the Dharma to us. Discover the profound and subtle radiance of the world.